Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Allison and today I'm going to talk about my 2026 knitting wish list. I know I have quite a few newer viewers to the channel as of late, which is really exciting, so I'll just do a quick introduction to myself. Like I said, my name is Allison. I am a knitter from Montreal, Quebec, Canada, where we're currently experiencing snowstorm because it's January. I've lived here my whole life. I live here currently with my husband, who I've been with for almost 11 years now. I've been knitting for about 6.5 years at this point, and clearly it's a huge hobby and passion of mine, and I spend a lot of my time doing it. My other sort of favorite hobby passion that I have is running. I've been running for about 12 years now. I'm also a fairly big reader and I love to travel as well. And I'm just very excited that you are here. Today, I wanted to talk about some of the projects that I would like to knit in 2026. In the past, I think I've fallen into the trap of doing seasonal knitting videos where I will come in with a really big, ambitious list, and then, of course, I'm not knitting 6, 7, 8 sweaters in a quarter. I think in total in 2025, I only actually knit 5 adult-size sweaters. So in the past, I think I've been a little bit too ambitious, biting off more than I can chew, coming in here and making winter knitting plans with 12 different sweaters and 4 accessories that I want to make. I know myself well enough by now that I know that that's not super realistic. So rather than a seasonal planning video or even like a make 9 video for the year, I wanted to be really intentional with my wish list and my plans for this year and go ahead and make some swatches of some yarn that I have in my stash that I've had for a while, for projects that I've been wanting to make for a while, and actually hold myself accountable and make them. I'm not saying I will get to everything on this list in 2026. As a matter of fact, I probably won't, just as new patterns come out and more things are catching my eye. And of course, new yarn is entering my stash. But this is sort of a list of things that I've been wanting to make for a while. I've had the materials for a while. And so knitting up these swatches sort of helped me to get excited about these projects again that I genuinely do want to make. And if it's not this year, then it'll be next year or it'll be the year after that. I do really want to make all of these projects, and so I figured I would share that with you all. Before I get started with my wish list of projects, I will quickly talk about what I am currently wearing. This is the Harlow Sweater V-neck by Kadri. I knit this up about 2 years ago now, almost exactly 2 years ago. I made this out of KnitPicks palette in the color Douglas Fir. I held it double. And I'm pretty sure I made this in the large size, but I also went up a needle size from the recommended needle in the pattern. I think I might have used a 5.5 or 6 millimeter needle for this, quite a large needle. And I was a little concerned that the gauge would be a little bit too open, but I think it looks great. And after blocking, this yarn is really nice. It's soft and it sort of fills in all those gaps. But yeah, I really wanted a oversized sweater that was intentionally oversized, and I had never knit a v-neck before, a sweater at least, and to this day, this is the only v-neck sweater I've ever knit, and it's still one of my favorites. I think this color is just amazing, and I really love the palette yarn. I've used this on one other project, which was a sweater for my husband last year in a very textured pattern. It was the Moby sweater by PetiteKnit, and the yarn lent itself very well to all of that texture, and I think it also looks great in stockinette like this. And so, yeah, definitely one of my favorites. It's one that I've had to pill a couple times, or depill rather. It does have a little bit of pilling, but overall not too bad, and it's a really great, comfy around the house sweater that I've been loving wearing. That's actually a very good segue into the first project that I would like to make. I've talked about this one on the channel several times. I think I had this come up in at least 2 of my planning videos last year or the year before, and it's the Lakes Pullover by Ozetta, and I would like to use the KnitPicks palette held double, just like the one I'm wearing. This is palette in the color Pimento, so it's quite a bright red, which I've not really knit with for myself before. I tend to go with more muted kind of like pinky reds, but this is a really fun pop of color. It definitely leans a little bit more cool toned than like an orangey red, which I tend to prefer for myself. I think I'm like a winter color palette, so I try to pick colors within that range. But I also want something fun and bright, which I don't have too much of in my wardrobe right now. And although red is my favorite color, and burgundies and reds and all sort of shades within that spectrum are colors I tend to gravitate towards when it comes to buying yarn or just buying clothes in general. I noticed a couple weeks ago that I just don't have any red sweaters in my wardrobe. I've got some, like dark burgundy, but I don't have anything straight up red. So there's definitely a hole in my wardrobe for this, and I really, really am looking forward to casting on the Lakes pullover. This is the swatch I knit up for the Lakes pullover. This is knit on 5mm needles, and of course the yarn is held double here because palette is a fingering weight yarn. And again, after blocking, I think this just fills out really, really nicely and looks really even and beautiful. The reason that this swatch is on a barber cord is because the Lakes pullover is a saddle shoulder design, so rather than just casting on what I would normally do for a swatch, I figured I would start the pattern effectively and cast on the recommended number of stitches for the shoulder and just knit to a certain length so that I could measure my row gauge. But then when it comes time to start knitting the sweater, I already have this and I can just continue with the shoulder. So like I said, this has been on the top of my queue and Ravelry on my to make list for probably close to 2 years now. And because I already have it sitting on a barber cord like this and I've already technically started the project, this will definitely be my first cast on, I guess. It's already casted on, but this will be the first project from the list that I do actually venture into. I'm currently working on finishing up my Dagmar sweater by PetiteKnit, which is all over cabled, very involved knit, which I've actually been quite monogamous on, which has been surprising and impressive to me. So it shouldn't be too much longer until I finish that one, which is really exciting. And so as soon as that one is off the needles, I will be casting on the Lakes pullover in this beautiful red. And yeah, I think, this is a hugely popular pattern for good reason. Many people have knit it. I've knit several Ozetta patterns and have really enjoyed all of them. So I'm very much looking forward to this and to joining the Lakes pullover club. The next pattern is much newer on my list and much newer just in general. This is a pattern that I saw the designer post a sample photo of back almost a year ago now. I think it was back in March. Fell in love with the sample and the color and the yarn that she knitted up in. And then I had to wait patiently until October and November when the pattern was finally released. And then the day the pattern came out, I purchased it right away. And that is the Lucy cardigan by the Knit Purl Girl. And I will show you the swatch I have here, which is lovely drape to this. I opted for a yarn that has an alpaca content, specifically because in Sophie's sample, she also used a wool alpaca blend. And actually this specific yarn that she uses in that pattern is the Gepard Garn Purl, which was sold out in the color that she used at my local yarn shop. And I was really set on that sort of like dark maroony, plummy sort of color. So I just put it to the side of my brain for the time being. And then I came across this shade of the Drops Lima, which is not exactly what she had used. It's definitely a little bit lighter. And in fact, it's very close to the shade of Pure Gint that I'm currently knitting up my Paul cardigan in, which is this right here. Not, the same, but it's definitely two pinky ready cardigans. But I do think they'll serve very different purposes in my wardrobe. They're very different designs overall, so I'm not too bothered by making two. So like I said, this is the Drops Lima, and this is the color Maroon. I have actually only ever used Drops yarn 2 other times. I used the brushed alpaca, which is like the very, very soft, fluffy yarn in a cardigan that I sort of sent to my knitting graveyard that I think I might frog. And I've used the Drops Baby Merino on like a half-finished baby blanket that I've got going. So this is my first time knitting like a garment for myself that I'm hoping to get a lot of wear out of the Drops. And it's my first time using Lima. I don't tend to knit with alpaca all that often. I have a couple garments with alpaca. I think I tend to shy away from alpaca because I know that the drape is quite different to wool, and I like my garments to have a little bit of structure that I know I will get out of wool, or out of sheep's wool rather. But alpaca, I just have always found so soft, and I loved, loved, loved the look of Sophie's sample. And I think even in her post, she specifies if you want a nice drape or you want to mimic the drape that I have in my sample, get a yarn with 50% alpaca content. So that was why I sprung for the drops. This one, unlike the Purl, is actually a 35% alpaca content and 65% wool. But I still think it'll give a really nice effect. I do already love the drape of this swatch I've got right here. So this pattern is knit up in an Andalusian stitch, which is quite simple to do, but I think it packs a big punch when you see it all knit up like this. If you are familiar with Sophie from the Knit Purl Girl, you may or may not know about her Aosta series. The Aosta cardigan and sweater were really popular when I started getting into knitting Instagram and YouTube. And I actually did knit myself an Aosta cardigan years and years ago. So it's the same stitch pattern, but the overall composition of the cardigan is very different. The Lucy cardigan is worked at a much smaller gauge than the Aosta. I'm pretty sure for my Aosta I used that big chunky wool that was all the rage from We Are Knitters way back in the day, on fairly large needles. And it also has different design elements. So the Aosta is a raglan, this sweater is a drop shoulder. There's a little split hem detail, which is really nice. And it is also a round neck cardigan, which I don't have any of yet, and I have been loving the look of, and I'm really eager to cast one on. So this is going to be that. I'm very excited. Of course, I will need buttons at some point. I have a few in my collection that I could try and choose from. I don't really know what I'm looking for at this point. I really love the look of knits where the buttons are essentially the same color as the yarn, and it's kind of a monochromatic look. But we'll see. I may not be able to find buttons in this color. I'll try my best, but I'm sure there are many different options that will look really good against this color. The next item on my wish list is a pattern that I found maybe a week ago, and I saw photos of it and I fell in love, and that is the Odelia sweater by Gregoria Fibers. I love a turtleneck, mock neck, high neck moment. You may know that I've knit the Louvre sweater by PetiteKnit twice. I've knit the Ingrid sweater that has the higher neck. I have always sort of gravitated toward turtlenecks, and I think this is just a beautiful turtleneck design. And for this sweater, I want to use some yarn that has been in my stash for coming up on 2 or 3 years now, that I originally purchased because I loved the color and I had no idea what I was going to do with it. And I think in these seasonal planning videos, I have gone on record several times saying that this yarn was going to become X or Y. For a brief moment of time, I thought it was going to become the Brady Loop sweater by Other Loops. But I kept getting cold feet, and I'll show you the yarn and then I'll explain why. So this is the yarn combination I'm using. This is the good wool from Purl Soho in the color Teal Abyss. I have my mohair all tangled up around it. The good wool from Purl Soho. This is what has been in my stash for years. I bought a few hanks of this years ago because I loved the color, but again, I didn't really have any concrete plans for it. I just knew that I had enough to make a sweater. But through consuming more knitting content and seeing other people knit with this yarn, I quickly learned that apparently this yarn is crazy when it comes to pilling, like really, really bad. And so I kind of put it to the side because I knew that I eventually would want to purchase a mohair to hold with this to sort of prevent as much pilling as I possibly could. So maybe this time last year, I went to one of my local yarn stores, Espresso, and I picked up some mohair. This is the Knitting for Olive Soft Silk Mohair, and it's a mess. And this is the shade Blue Jeans. And it's not an exact match. In fact, in this lighting, I would say it's not a match at all. but um, but I do find they complement each other nicely, and in darker lighting, they definitely look a bit closer. And they also knit up a really nice swatch. So this is the swatch of the good wool held with the Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair. It definitely sort of meets in the middle where the teal good wool leans a little bit more green, maybe. And this is sort of just a straight up, whoop. And the mohair is sort of just a straight up dusty blue color. This sort of makes a little bit of a, not marled, but I guess more greeny, bluey sort of shade that really mixes the two of them really nicely, I think. And it is just so soft and fluffy. I'm pretty sure of all of the swatches that I knit up for this video, this is my favorite. And the reason that I had hesitated so long to use this yarn was really just because I don't really wear blue. Even though I'm a winter palette and cooler tones are meant to look really good on me, I've never really owned much blue. I'm not typically drawn to blue when it comes to knitting. I think I've made 2 blue garments in the past. One of them was like right at the start of my knitting journey, and the other one is a camisole that doesn't quite fit me anymore. So I don't have too many blue items of clothing. And I think part of the reason was always that I thought blue on top looked silly with blue jeans, but that's just a really stupid take because I don't wear jeans hardly ever. But yeah, once I knit this up and sort of like looked at it against myself and felt the fabric, saw how beautiful the color was, I got so excited to cast on this project. This will be only my second time using the Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair. I'm currently using it in my Dagmar sweater that I'm holding with their heavy merino. And I don't know if it's just me or just the balls that I got, but it almost feels like this blue color was a lot fluffier than the Marzipan shade that I'm using for the other sweater. Or maybe it's just because I'm holding it with a thicker wool strand, so it's not giving as much fluff as it maybe would with held together with like a fingering merino. But this good wool here is a sport weight yarn, and I think they work really nicely together. And the fuzz is just really gorgeous. I think that's also a bit of a pattern in some of these swatches that I knit up, is that 3 of them I used holding mohair. And that's not something that I typically do. I think at the start of my knitting journey, mohair seemed fairly inaccessible to me just because I found that the brands that I saw people talking about, like Knitting for Olive and Isager, are always just very expensive. So the first time I tried to hold with a strand of fluff like this, it was like an acrylic mohair from Hobby that ended up being very itchy and not really enjoyable to wear. And in the past, I've tended to have more luck with like an alpaca suri or any kind of fluffy alpaca yarn instead. But of course, once having picked up and tried the Knitting for Olive merino, I can attest that it is very soft, and I'm sure it'll feel really nice on the skin. There is a mohair that I think is actually softer that I have coming up that I'll share with you. But yeah, the people are not lying when they say that this is soft. Again, I don't think it's the softest. I think some people might be irritated by something like this, but it is really lovely. And I think with the wool, it comes out to a really soft texture. So all that to say, I am hoping to knit the Odelia sweater in this beautiful blue color. This might be the second one that I cast on just because I'm so excited to have it. And I think blue will be a great addition to my wardrobe. I have none. Why do I not have any blue? All right, so the next pattern that I have on my list is another Ozetta pattern, and that is a very new release from Ozetta, and it's the Autumn Pullover. Another high neck, turtleneck sort of stockinette sweater, not dissimilar from the previous one I just shared, but obviously with some sort of like defining features that set them apart. This one also being very oversized and at a very large gauge, at least from what I'm used to. And I also went a little bit wacky with the color. So this is one that I'm still not 100% sold on if I want this yarn to be applied to this specific pattern. I love this pattern. I will knit it at some point, and I love this yarn combination, and I will use it for something at some point. But I'm not sure if this is going to be the right fit. I think I need to sleep on it a little bit. So this is the swatch that I've knit up. A little out of my norm, a little out of my comfort zone, but I was in Halifax at the end of last year visiting my sister, and I remember being in the mall, and there were a couple stores that had a few sweaters in the window that were like this sort of like grassy green, almost like a few shades darker than a lime green, maybe, you know, similar to a Brett green. And I just thought that they looked really nice, and I wanted one. And it's definitely a lot more marled than I think I had been hoping for, but that is definitely attributed to the wool that I'm holding here. So this strand is knit out of more KnitPicks yarn. I'm using probably one of my favorite yarns ever. This is the KnitPicks Wool of the Andes. This is the worsted weight version, and the color here is Bamboo Heather. And as you can see, I'm not sure how easy it is to tell in this light, but it is quite a heathered yarn. Not typically something I would tend to reach for, but I thought that it would look really, really nice with this mohair that I decided to hold with it, which is also KnitPicks. This is the KnitPicks Aloft mohair in the color Mountain Fern Heather. And, you know, not to say one is better than the other. I haven't worn either of these yet, so I really can't say. But this Aloft mohair is so, so fluffy and so much softer to the touch, I find, than the Knitting for Olive. I definitely think I prefer the look of the Knitting for Olive when it comes to the silk core. Obviously this, you know, seamlessly blue. You can't really see any like white core in there. Whereas this yarn, you can definitely see that the core of this is white. But I think knit up in a swatch, it is a little harder to tell. Yeah, this is sort of a crazy color for me. I wasn't sure maybe if I wanted a high neck in this color. I think it would be really fun to have, and I've seen other people knit up sort of limey green colored turtlenecks, and I've really liked the look of them. But another sweater that I was potentially considering was the sweater number 23 by My Favorite Things Knitwear. I do already own that pattern, so it would be fairly easy to swap out. I believe the gauge on that one is a little bit smaller than the Ozetta pattern, but I could probably make it work, or maybe size up my needles and then size down the size that I want to make. This is definitely a very thick fabric, so this is a worsted weight held with a mohair, so it probably comes out to be around an Aran weight. And with how fluffy this mohair is, it is definitely a warm combination. I think an entire sweater in this would be really, really nice and toasty. And for that reason, I think this might be something that I put on the back burner until next winter, maybe at the end of 2026, and revisit, just because I don't think I'll have the time right now to get around to this before the weather starts to warm up. And it might be a little tough when it's 40 degrees outside in the summer to want to knit on something like this. But yeah, I think I'm still, you know, warming up to this yarn combination. It's definitely a little bit out there. The colors are not a perfect match once again. But I thought this would be kind of fun and different for me. And so if you have any pattern suggestions or ideas of what would look really nice in this color, please let me know. If you've knit anything in a color like this before, do you like it? Do you have a pattern that you think would go really well with this? I would love to hear from you. I will very quickly talk about a pattern that is on my wish list that I don't actually have the yarn in stash for yet. And that's because it's a very new pattern that I only very recently discovered. And that is the Loon sweater by CM Knits. For the record, I am very much leaning toward the Knitting for Olive heavy merino for this. I was thinking of doing the main color in Midnight, which is sort of like a dark, like grayish blue looking color. And then I would use Marzipan as the accent color. And I do actually have some Marzipan in my stash because this is what I'm knitting up the Dagmar sweater with. And I wanted to wait to order this yarn just because if I end up having some left over from my Dagmar sweater, then I don't want to end up having to buy another ball of Marzipan for the accent color. I don't think I will have much of this left, but I do want to know before I go ahead and order, just so that I'm not over ordering and bringing more yarn in that I don't need. But yeah, this is a pattern that I've been seeing a lot on my feed lately. It seems like it became very popular very quickly, and for good reason. I think it's a super cute design, color work, but a very small section of color work, so it's fairly accessible. I believe from what I've seen on Ravelry, the color work is worked flat, which I've never done before, but because it's such a small section, I really don't think I will mind all that much. So I was super drawn to this pattern for two reasons. Maybe you can guess them. First off, it is like aggressively Canadian to me, and I can just so easily picture myself wearing this around a campfire in the summer or in the fall. I love being Canadian. I love wearing my Canadian heritage loud and proud, so I think this is a really fun design. And the second reason, obviously, and I think probably why it's gained a bit of traction as of late, is because it reminds me of Heated Rivalry, because of the loons, the stupid Canadian wolf bird. So it's a little bit from column A, a little bit from column B. The second point was probably what pushed me over the edge in really wanting to knit this. And so, yeah, I hope to order this yarn fairly soon once I finish the Dagmar and I know how much of the contrast color I'm going to have left. But I just think it's such a cute sweater. And I've been wanting to do more color work ever since I made the Louis pullover a year and a half ago by Sari Nordland. So I'm really excited to jump into this one. I am still at the cottage. I live at the cottage. I moved into the cottage. So this will be a great sweater to wear at the cottage. The last garment that I have on my list is one that I somewhat recently got the yarn for. I purchased this during the Knitting for Olive fundraiser that they were doing to raise money for the crisis in Gaza. I got some Merino and soft silk mohair, both in the color Claret. And believe it or not, although this is a very, very popular combination, I have never knit with both of these together. I've used the Merino before in Bordeaux for a Stockholm sweater that I made probably 4 years ago now. I've also used it on a couple summer tops, and I've really enjoyed it. Like, people are not lying when they say that this stuff does not pill. It's a really great quality yarn, and you're paying a little bit more for it, but you are getting your money's worth, in my opinion. And then the mohair I have here, obviously. I have some Marzipan for my Dagmar sweater, and before that I had never used it. So really looking forward to holding these together. And as a matter of fact, I do have a swatch because of course I do. This one is the only swatch I have not blocked yet, so it looks like it's rolling up like a little hot dog. But I think you can get the gist of the fabric here. This was a dream to knit up, to be honest. I definitely understand the hype. I think the color is beautiful. I think the swatch feels really nice. Again, with blocking, I'm sure this will change a little bit, but I think it's just gorgeous. Again, not dissimilar from the drops yarn that I will be using on the cardigan, but this is definitely a little bit more red and a little bit on the darker side. And with this, my plan is to knit the Charlie pullover by Moreca Knit. I've talked before about how I really enjoy Moreca Knit's pattern writing style. I am working on the Paul cardigan right now that I have had no complaints about, have really enjoyed the process of knitting that up. I think it's a really well thought out pattern, and she is a great pattern writer. This is, once again, another stockinette stitch. I know that's sort of a theme in my wish list, but I think I'm finding that the basic stockinette sweaters are the ones that I really am gravitating toward when I'm looking through my closet and trying to figure out what to wear. So I think fun knits will come up throughout the year, but these like really classic stockinette pieces are ones that are going to be workhorses in my wardrobe and that I will be getting a lot of wear out of. So the Charlie pullover is, like I said, just all over stockinette. What sets this apart is that it has a really nice collar detail. Knitting the collar will be a first for me. Years and years ago, I tried to knit at the time, PetiteKnit had a short-sleeved collared shirt pattern. I don't remember the name of that pattern. I will include a picture in the name, of course. And at the time, I had seen someone on Instagram take this pattern and modify it to make it long-sleeved. And I absolutely loved the look of that. They had kind of removed the buttons increased the sleeve length, and it effectively looked like a different pattern, but they had used this one kind of as the base. And then very shortly after that, PetiteKnit came out with her Elizabeth blouse. All that to say, I do own that previous pattern, the t-shirt pattern, and I did try to cast on once upon a time, and I found it fiddly, and I gave up on it probably too quickly. I was used to my normal long tail cast on, and I didn't want to try anything new and was stubborn, so I ended up sort of putting that idea away, and now I'm excited to hopefully revisit the whole collar situation. I think this is a really beautiful pattern. I've actually seen a couple people on Ravelry knit it up in the exact same colors that I am going to knit it up in, which is really fun. And yeah, a beautiful swatch like all of these. I think in the past I've sort of come up with vague plans of what I'd like to knit, and I see the yarn and I'm like, oh yeah, I will use that for that. But this year actually going in and putting in the effort to knit up a few swatches, and admittedly effort, it was maybe 2 evenings of time to knit these 5 swatches. It's really excited me about a lot of these patterns, and I'm so glad that I did it. And seeing the fabric all knit up and getting to feel it and getting to sort of see how it changes with blocking and experience actually the action of knitting with it, I think is really fun, and I would highly recommend if you are unsure of what you want to put your yarns towards, knit up a swatch. You'll probably fall more in love with the yarn combination, or you'll decide you don't like it and you can, pivot. But I think this has really helped me, so I'm super, super stoked about this one as well, of course. The very last wish list item that I have for this video is the only accessory, and I'm going to be really basic, and I'm going to say that I want to make the Sophie shawl, and I would like to use this KnitPicks Wonderfluff yarn. This is a yarn I've had in my stash, along with all of this KnitPick yarn for the most part. I've had in my stash for years, at least a year, and I don't even remember why I originally bought it, to be quite honest. I have 5 balls of it, so not quite enough for a garment. It's a bulky weight, super, super soft and fluffy yarn. It is 70% baby alpaca, 23% nylon, and 7% merino wool. And it is just one of those sort of blown yarns. I think this is similar to the Drops Air. I don't quite know how it compares in softness and in composition, just because I've not knit with that yarn, but from what I can tell, they're fairly similar. But yeah, I think this would be very nice for a scarf, shawl. I was a little bit hesitant just because it's basically my hair color, and I do like to have some kind of contrast in what I'm wearing, but I think it's a beautiful color that will look really nice with my camel colored, beige colored trench coat, wool coat that I wear when it's not super freezing. But yeah, I don't know. If you think that that's not enough contrast, maybe I will pivot and put this towards something else. I was also considering the hood. I'm currently knitting the Alex hood for my mom, which is sort of a late Christmas present. It's almost done, but I've been seeing a lot more Sophie hoods and just hoods in general on my Instagram feed again this year, and really enjoy the look of it. I have a weekend hat that I wear the hell out of that, could probably use a buddy to swap in and out with. So I think a hood would be a nice little option to have in my winter accessories wardrobe. But yeah, I don't know, maybe if you've knit the hood and the shawl, or one or the other, and you have a preference, let me know. I'm very curious. I'd love to know. I have knit the Sophie shawl in the past. I don't actually have the Sophie shawl pattern. I have the Sophie scarf pattern. I just changed the increase rate and made it bigger, essentially. I haven't worn that all winter, actually. I was wearing it a lot last winter. Haven't really worn it much this year. But overall, it was a pleasant knitting experience. It's a fairly basic pattern. I'm sure most of you know how it's constructed at this point. But yeah, I just thought a shawl I might get a little bit more use out of than a hood, and I could sort of wear it like in the office or on my shoulders when it gets really cold. But if you really love the hood, let me know. It's definitely on the table. I think if I was to knit the hood, I might want to do it in maybe a brighter color. But anyway, I have this fluffy brown yarn that is super soft and I think would be really nice next to skin. So a scarf seems to be the logical option. And that is all I have for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Maybe you got some inspiration As I mentioned, I'm really trying to knit from stash this year. I said the same last year. I was mildly successful at that, but I think this year there's no point in spending all this money on yarn and having it just sit on your shelves. You got to use it. So I want to really put some of this nice yarn to use. I love all of the swatches I knit up for the most part, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what kind of garments and accessories they can become. And yeah, if any of these are also on your wish list or your Make 9 or your Ravelry queue, let me know. I'd love to know what color you're knitting them up in or what your thoughts are about them. And yeah, I hope you are keeping warm if you're in sort of the polar vortex region near Montreal like myself. I know Toronto got hit with a lot of snow. We got hit with a lot of snow. If you are in the United States, I hope you are staying safe. But thank you so much for tuning in if you made it to the end of this video, and I will see you soon, hopefully.